This happened last spring, a few days before Easter. I live in a small rural town in Indiana, and for most of my life, I've gone to the same church, St. Augustine's. It's one of those old brick churches built in the 1800s, with stained glass windows and creaky wooden pews that smell like lemon oil and thyme. I started volunteering there last year. Nothing big, just helping set up for holiday services, dusting the altar, polishing brass. I'm not super religious, but my grandma was, and after she passed, I felt like maybe I owed it to her to stay involved. That week, a group of 5 of us were getting things ready for the Easter Sunday service. Pastor Jim, our kind-hearted but absent-minded priest, Helen, who was in her 70s and ran the women's group with an iron will, her nephew Kyle, a college kid home for break, Marcy, who handled decorations and floral stuff, and me. On Thursday afternoon, we were cleaning out the old supply closet behind the sacristy. It was one of those tight, dusty rooms where old candle holders, seasonal banners, and broken folding chairs go to die. But we needed to find the plastic eggs for the children's hunt. Kyle was digging through a stack of hymnals when he called out, "Hey, there's something weird here." Behind a shelving unit shoved tight against the back wall, he'd uncovered an old trapdoor, about 4 feet by 3, wood reinforced with iron bands. It was nailed shut, but the nails were rusty and brittle. Pastor Jim said he'd never seen it before. Of course, curiosity got the better of us. We pried it open with a crowbar from the tool shed out back. Underneath was a narrow stone staircase, spiraling down into darkness. It wasn't on any blueprint, not even the ones Marcy pulled from the county archives when they redid the fire codes. The air coming up from it was cold and dry, but not earthy like a root cellar. More like old paper. We grabbed flashlights. I didn't want to go first, but Kyle was already halfway down before anyone could stop him. The stairs led to a hidden sub-basement, one none of us had ever known existed. The ceiling was low, the stone walls crumbling in places, and the floor was packed dirt. But what made us all stop short was what was down there. It was a miniature church. Pews, tiny, wooden, warped with age, were lined in rows facing a small raised platform with a crumbling stone altar. A rusted brass cross lay crooked behind it. Cobwebs hung like curtains from the low beams. And on the far wall stood a black confessional booth, half-rotted, its curtain long gone. "Jesus," Marcy whispered. "This isn't on any record," Pastor Jim muttered. "Why would they build this under the church?" We all kind of stood there for a minute, taking it in. It was like stepping into some forgotten chapel that time left behind. That's when we heard the voice. It's not Easter without a sacrifice. It was faint, childlike, but coming clearly from the confessional. We froze. Kyle shined his flashlight directly on it. "What the hell was that?" "Hello," Pastor Jim called. No answer. We thought maybe someone had snuck down ahead of us. Kyle yanked open the confessional door, but it was empty. Dusty. Undisturbed. We chalked it up to acoustics. Old buildings do weird things with sound. That's what we told ourselves anyway. But later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About how it had sounded like a little girl. And how calm her voice had been. The next morning, Good Friday, I went back early. Alone. I didn't tell anyone. I told myself I just wanted to take pictures, maybe figure out what the place was. The air was colder down there than it had been the day before. No electricity, no windows. But I swear the confessional looked different, like it had been cleaned a little. I stood in front of it for a while. Then, God help me, I went inside. I don't know what I expected. Nothing happened at first. Just the sound of my own breathing in the dark. Then a voice, right behind the grate, soft and gravelly this time. "Confess." I jumped so hard I hit the wooden wall behind me. "Who's there?" "Confess," it said again. I started to push the door open, but it didn't budge. It had locked itself. The voice didn't sound like a child this time. It sounded older. Not angry, just patient. I sat there for a few seconds, my pulse racing, trying not to panic. I don't know what you want," I stammered. It was silent for a long moment. Then, the blood remembers. Then nothing. No movement. No sound. The door opened on its own. I ran. I told myself I must have hallucinated it, maybe from the dust or the stress or something deeper, something I hadn't processed from my past. But when I told Pastor Jim about it later that day, he went pale. "There's something I didn't tell you," he said. "We found mention of a subchapel like that in a journal from 1891. It was sealed off after a ceremony went wrong." "What kind of ceremony?" I asked. He didn't answer. just shook his head. They called it the Lamb's Offering. We agreed not to go back down there. Kyle and I nailed the trapdoor shut ourselves that afternoon. But on Easter morning, before the service, we found the nails on the ground, the trapdoor wide open. And inside the sanctuary, on the altar steps neatly laid out, was one of the plastic Easter eggs from the supply closet. It was cracked open. Inside was a drop of fresh blood. No one had a nosebleed. No one was missing a finger. No one admitted going down there. I haven't been back to St. Augustine since. Neither has Kyle. The church is still open, but nobody talks about the basement. Sometimes I dream about that voice. Not the child's voice. The other one. The one that said, confess. And in the dream, I always sit down in the booth. And this time, I don't get back out. Story 2. I never meant to become the groundskeeper of an abandoned church. It wasn't in the plan. I was just supposed to watch the place for a few weeks while my uncle recovered from surgery. He lived alone in a little farmhouse on the edge of Hartfield, Illinois, a town so small it didn't even have a stoplight. St. Emery's sat on the edge of a cornfield about a mile down the road. Tiny stone chapel. Sloped roof. No congregation for the past 10 years. The diocese had shuttered it after a slow decline in attendance, but they still kept it minimally maintained, mostly because it was technically a historic landmark. My uncle had been doing odd jobs for them for years, clearing leaves, checking for leaks, keeping the property from completely falling apart. So when he threw out his back 2 weeks before Easter, he called me up. I was between gigs, so I said sure. Most days were quiet. I swept the porch, cleaned out a few bird nests, replaced some broken light bulbs. I never went inside at first, just peeked through the dusty windows. It was empty, save for a few wooden pews and a warped pulpit. Then, one night, about a week before Easter, I saw the light. It was after midnight. I was driving past on my way back from town, and through the chapel's front window, I saw a flickering glow, like candlelight. I pulled over. The door was locked, just like always. I walked around to the side, thinking maybe a squatter had gotten in somehow. That's when I noticed the basement doors, the old double bulkhead-style kind, were cracked open. I didn't even know there was a basement. I figured it was just a utility crawl space, maybe for the furnace or something. But as I got closer, I heard something. Low chanting, like a prayer in Latin. I stood at the top of the stairs and called out, "Hello?" The voices stopped instantly. Then came the sound of scurrying, like footsteps rushing off into the dark, and the candlelight vanished. I waited a few seconds, then went down, flashlight in hand. The basement wasn't what I expected. It was finished stone walls, old with support beams, and a floor covered in mildewed red carpet. Along the walls were small niches, like altars, filled with melted candle stubs, old rosaries, dried flowers. And in the center of the room was a circular stone structure about 4 feet high, covered with a slab of slate. It looked like a well, but there was no opening. No one was down there. At least, no one I could see. I got out fast. The next day, I asked my uncle if he knew about the basement. He just got quiet and said they used to hold midnight services during Lent. Long time ago, before I was born. When I pressed him, he finally added, "Don't go down there during Holy Week. Just don't." He wouldn't say anything more. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that circle of stone, about the voices stopping all at once. On Maundy Thursday, I made the mistake of going back. It was about 11 p.m. when I drove out there. I parked down the road this time and approached on foot. I didn't want to spook whoever was using the place. The basement doors were wide open again. This time, I went down quietly. And I wasn't alone. There were 6 people, hooded, kneeling in a circle around the stone structure. Candles lit their faces from below, giving their features a warped, flickering look. I couldn't make out the chant, but it had rhythm, like a lullaby with teeth. One of them was holding something small, pale. At first, I thought it was a doll. Then it moved. A baby goat. Tiny. Shaking. Before I could react, the leader drew a blade. I knocked over a stack of paint cans trying to back away. They all turned at once, but no one ran. No one even flinched. The leader stepped forward, pulled back their hood. It was a woman in her 60s, face lined but oddly serene. She smiled at me like she knew me. "You're just in time," she said. "I'm calling the cops," I stammered. She tilted her head. "They won't come here. Not during the vigil." I turned and ran. Didn't stop until I was back in the car. I made it halfway to town before I realized something. My flashlight was still down there. And my name, my full name, was carved into the wooden handle. I didn't go back for it. The next morning, the basement doors were closed again. Locked, I told myself it was just some weird rural cult thing. Animal sacrifice, maybe. Illegal, but explainable. But on Easter morning, I got a voicemail. No caller ID, just a raspy voice whispering, "Blessed is the keeper of the gate. The blood is awake." I deleted it. But then, late that night, I found something waiting on my uncle's porch. A plastic Easter egg, bright blue. I opened it. Inside was a sliver of stone, gray and cracked, exactly like the stone in the center of that basement. Wrapped around it was a strip of old cloth, and written on the fabric in what looked like faded ink, or dried blood, was one word: soon. I moved out the next day, left town completely. My uncle's not mad. He says he understands. Says not everyone can handle Easter. Not real Easter. Not what it used to mean. Story 3. I grew up in a tiny Midwest town called Holbrook. One of those places with a 2-block main street, a population under 1,000, and a calendar built around the same 5 annual events. The chili cook-off, county fair, fireworks on the lake for the 4th, Christmas tree lighting, and the Easter parade. Every year since I can remember, the town put together this rickety little procession of floats, local bands, and decorated pickup trucks. It always ended with the Golden Rabbit float, a kind of cartoonish golden egg-shaped trailer with a guy in a full bunny costume riding on top, tossing candy to kids. The person in the suit changed every year. It was a small honor to get chosen, usually someone from the community, someone volunteering for the fun of it. They'd wave from the float, hop down at the end to greet the kids, take pictures. It was cheesy but kind of sweet. Tradition, you know? This year, something about it fell off from the beginning. I didn't even know who was supposed to be in the suit. Normally, the town newsletter or local Facebook page would announce it. Pastor Tom's hopping into Easter this year. Or something dumb like that. But this time, nothing. No announcement, no pictures. Just silence. The day of the parade, I helped set up with my younger sister, Melanie. She's 13, just old enough to think the whole thing's lame, but still secretly excited about candy. We were hanging ribbons on the front of town hall when I saw the bunny. It was around 8 a.m., 2 hours before the parade was even supposed to start. The float hadn't arrived yet, but the bunny was already there, just standing at the far end of the street by the bakery. Full suit, white fur, pink paws, bulbous stomach, and that oversized plastic head with the frozen smile and glassy blue eyes. It looked almost too clean. Brand new, maybe. But what really got me was how still it stood. Not waving, not handing out candy. Just watching. I nudged Melanie. "Is that the Easter bunny?" She shrugged, frowning. "It's early." The thing didn't move the entire time we were setting up. Just stood there. A few little kids ran past it and waved, but it didn't wave back. When the float finally pulled up an hour later, the bunny was already there waiting. Nobody saw him get on. He just appeared on top of the egg-shaped trailer like he belonged there. I assumed maybe someone helped him up while I was distracted, but the whole thing fell off. As the parade started rolling, the bunny waved, but in these jerky, delayed movements, like he wasn't used to it. His head would turn a few seconds too late after someone shouted at him. His body moved a little too slow, like he was underwater. And then during the egg hunt, that's when people started really noticing. After the parade, there's always an egg hunt in the field behind the church. Parents stand on the perimeter while kids run wild. The bunny usually wanders around, taking pictures, handing out a few golden eggs with bigger prizes. But this time, he didn't hand anything out. He didn't talk, didn't wave. He just walked slowly through the grass, head tilted slightly, and watched the kids. One dad, Mr. Lansing, I think, joked that the guy inside was probably drunk. But when his daughter tripped and the bunny reached down to help her up, Lansing grabbed her and walked away. He told me later something about the way the bunny's hand moved didn't feel right. It was slow and unsure, like someone learning how to bend their fingers. He said the palm felt soft, like there was no structure under the fur. That night, the costume was found sitting behind the church, right where the egg hunt had been, neatly folded, except for the head, which was placed on top like a display. Inside the torso was something heavy and wet. The police took it away, but word got around fast. It had soaked through the fur, leaving a dark patch beneath. I overheard one of the firemen say it smelled metallic. By Monday, the mayor announced that they were trying to identify whoever had worn the suit. Apparently, no one had signed up. No one was scheduled. The guy who usually organizes the float said the suit was delivered that morning. He assumed it came from the parks committee, but they said they'd never ordered a new costume. The old one had been in storage. People were freaked out, but Holbrook moves on fast. I wouldn't have thought much more about it, honestly, just a weird Easter story, except for what Melanie found a few days later. She'd taken a bunch of photos during the parade and uploaded them to her laptop. I came into her room and saw her staring at one with a weird look on her face. "Look at this," she said, pointing at the screen. It was a photo from 2 days before the parade, Friday afternoon. She'd been out walking with her friend just near the school. In the background, across the street, standing just at the edge of a wooded lot, was the bunny. Same costume, same posture, just watching. "I didn't even see him when I took it," she whispered. There were more. One behind the library, one near the gas station, in the reflection of the window. Always distant, always still. In one, you could just barely make out the white shape standing between the trees behind the church. That one was timestamped from Thursday, 3 days before the parade. We sent the photos to the police. They took them seriously, at least at first. But there wasn't much to go on. No prints in the costume. No way to trace where it came from. The box it was delivered in had no label, no return address. The only thing inside was a Polaroid photo, taped to the inside flap. It was blank at first glance, but under a black light, they said you could make out part of an image, a room with old wallpaper, a chair, and a child's shoe on the floor. They didn't tell anyone that part. I only know because my friend Tyler's dad works in evidence. He said the room looked underground somehow. Cement walls. No windows. Nothing ever came of the investigation. The story faded. Just a weird prank, they said. Probably some drifter with a sick sense of humor. But here's the part one can't stop thinking about. 2 nights ago, I was going through some old pictures from my 10th birthday. We'd had it at the park back when my parents were still together. There's this one photo of me blowing out candles on a sheet cake. And just behind the group, out of focus but still there, standing half behind a tree, a white shape, big ears, and a frozen smile.